I am a believer, Mike, that if you don't check in with your employees will eventually check out, right? And that goes back to our conversation to begin with. How do you feel? Because how I feel is what I'm going to believe.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at goodmorninghr.com. Over the last 2 decades, the search for meaningful ways to increase employee engagement has taken us from, well, I pay them on time, to foosball tables in the break room and surveys on which follow-up actions usually never taken. Today's guest points to data that demonstrates the factors that employers should focus on if they want to increase engagement of their teams. George Rogers is the Chief Culture Officer at Lighthouse Research and Advisory and Culture of Good, and he's founder of Candle, LLC. He's a keynote speaker, author of Champion Your Purpose, and co-host of the Champion Your Culture podcast. George helps organizations and leaders craft cultures rooted in purpose, ensuring that their work makes a positive difference while driving business growth. Welcome to Good Morning HR, George.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about being here. And it's a great morning when you're waking up and being a part of this lovely show. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Let's get on the same page about definitions, because if you ask 5 different consultants for definitions of culture, you're going to get 5 different definitions. So when you're talking about culture, what are you talking about there?
Yeah, it's my belief, right, that culture is how most people, not all, but most people feel, believe, and behave. Not all the time, but most of the time, right? So it's that feeling and that belief that becomes behavior within the workplace. So how they feel, believe, and behave is how I describe it to those who I'm talking to.
So those norms of behavior that we accept generally, and sometimes they're spelled out, sometimes they're not, but we know this is how things get done in the organization. And if I feel positive about the organization, it seems like a positive culture. If I feel negative towards the organization, it's a more negative culture, and those kind of things. And so in your model, somebody can somebody see something as a bad culture and somebody else see it as a good culture? Just it boils down to fit, something like that? Or do you think there's more, is it more definitive than that?
Yeah, I think it's really broken down to a lot of different things, right? We could be working in 2 different departments under 2 different leadership styles, right? And so a lot of what employees feel comes directly from those who they are being led by, or in some cases, micromanaged by or managed by. It's my belief that, we as leaders, we lead people, we manage systems and processes. And whenever that is turned around, right, the feeling is different. When I'm being led and help learning how to manage the processes and systems within the workplace, I have a sense more of being connected. I feel more respected. I feel more appreciated and accepted for who I am, right, from my leader. When I feel like my leader, then on the other side, somebody else could say, man, I feel like my leader is trying to manage me and lead the systems and process. They may not feel that same mentality. So when we say most of the time, it is directly about how you may feel by not necessarily your peers, but by the leadership. And that's where it all starts.
Yeah, it's almost a Good Morning HR drinking game, that because I really believe that we shouldn't use the term manager when it comes to people. You can manage processes, you can manage commodities, you can manage software code, but you lead people. As soon as you start trying to manage people like you do something that is different, that's consistent. People are different every day.
Yes.
And that super employee today may have a bad night tonight and come here tomorrow and be a completely different person for the day. And so leading people is, I think, really different than managing people. And so I really like that you brought that up, because I think there's a big difference there. So then when we're talking about engagement, well, how do you define engagement?
When I think about engagement, I think it's something that's really sustained and meaningful interaction, right? There's something that's connecting us. When I mentioned that everything rises and falls and everything starts with leadership, that engagement is something that really starts with leadership. How are they building their teams? Are they helping us as employees connect with each other? Are we engaged? More than just communication, more than just what we do. And I think this is something that we have seen since, post-COVID, the pandemic, is that people, when it comes to going back into the workplace, right? We want to have a sense of purpose. We all know what our job description is and what we're doing it. When I think about engagement, I think about the why, right? What we do, and then why are we doing it? What is the fulfillment aspect? Because when I'm at home, I'm reminded of why I was doing what I was doing during the pandemic. I saw my son growing up every day, being a part of that daily task. When I typically will leave my office to walk around and hang out with some of my peers, we were talking about life and family. Right? When we were able to explore that newness of working at home, we started connecting with our family. Now, some people say, for me, my wife was like, when did you go back to the office? Right. He was like, when are you staying? Because we're having so much fun. So there's this bonding, connection. Engagement is that sense of purpose and meaning where we're connecting with each other more than just about what we do, but why we're doing it. Having a sense of purpose and said, I know why he really works so hard. I know why he's dedicated. I know why he shows up for others, right? It's that connection of, I get to know my employees, as a leader, they're engaged with me because I want to connect. I want to know their why. What's the purpose? That creates that sense of belonging. We talk about culture, feel, believe, behave. That sense of belonging, the psychological definition of belonging is I feel respected, accepted, and appreciated by my direct leader. Right. And so when there's a sense of belonging for the employment, engagement rises. What connects all of that together is understanding, having a sense of purpose and meaning behind all those things.
So engagement's a thing out there. Why is it important? I mean, it sounds obvious because we always say, you always hear every HR conference has 15 sessions on engagement and everybody talks about it. Why do you think, there's still leaders out there that say, hey, I'm paying at market or better. People just need to show up, do their work, get the hell out, go have their own life outside. Good for them. Why do you think engagement's really important? Why should a company really focus on that?
I think the foundation of it is that those with high engagement also see performance, right? They see that there's clarity around what they do. There's unity within. There's more of a functioning culture. Companies that we work with and research that we have at Lighthouse Research and Advisory, really shares this story where people who have a desire within the next 6 months to leave. We recently did a peace survey, performance engagement culture enablement. I'm an acronym junkie, by the way. And so when we did this peace research, one of the things that we found is that employees that are looking to leave their company within the next 6 months, dysfunction culture, right? And low engagement. And so when we talk about, we got to find, people we're looking to recruit, we're looking to, keep retention high, and get our retention in. How do we keep our employees? It's through engagement. Having that sense of engagement, starting with leadership, creating that team camaraderie where they're communicating with each other. There's a sense of bond and connection. People want to stay. People want to stay where they're respected, accepted, and appreciated. And that engagement is a huge piece of that, right? That keeps things together and increases things like performance in your workplace culture.
So you were talking about employees who are planning on quitting and looking for another job in the next 6 months. That 6-month window is critical if this is a high-performing employee, somebody whose skills we really want to maintain, keep on board, their institutional knowledge, all that. What are those things that are driving somebody to actually look, what does your research say that these people are feeling a lack of this or they need something else in order, and that's what they're looking for. Is it, I'm sure it's not just comp. So what are those components of when you're talking about engagement? Can you break them down?
Yeah, I think that the top 3 things, and I'll just mention the 3 that we see that is of interest of employees. What do we want most of? Because as you said, money's not a huge factor because we can all find that within technology. There's so many different avenues. So money, it used to be a money driven, right? Right now it's development. Yeah, I want to be invested in. I'm investing in myself, but what is the company doing? So if we look at it from this scenario, from those people that are saying, it's not about money. Money's not the highest priority. What are my top three priorities? We see that people want to be in a place where there's healthy culture and leadership, where leadership is supporting them. So there's growth and development, right? So we're looking for something. If you're not going to pay me high because money's not a high priority, what we want is that I'm going to be developed, right? That this is my long game. This is my vision. And I desire to be at XYZ within the next 2 years, right? And so how am I going to get there with this company? The third thing, after we look at the culture, we look at leadership development, we see that people are saying well-being is a priority. Right? And so well-being can cover a lot of aspects for a lot of people. What does that look like? And so within the benefits package, right, we see that flexibility. Benefits have been a huge priority. Within those benefits, you see organizations and companies that are now having access, even for mental health care, right, if you want to bring that in, where they're having childcare, they're having counseling, right? On-site access quarterly in some of these organizations. And so you're having access now to discounted memberships to gyms. And so those different things. So it's more of a benefit. What's in my benefit package? More than just compensation, what are the benefits that I have with this organization? Is it flex? Is it hybrid? Right? Some of those things that can help out with employees' well-being and mental health.
So let's break some of those down. So that personal development, that professional development, those kinds of things. We've talked a lot on the podcast this year and last about AI, and I'm doing a lot of conference presentations on AI and ethical issues employers are facing and how they implement it and all of that. And one of the things that keeps coming up is, and the question I don't have a strong answer to, is what are we going to do about, one, those folks who are going to be displaced? I mean, it's going to happen. I mean, we're not, we may need in HR, one HR rep where we needed 3 before to do these administrative clerical tasks. And that's going to happen across the organization. What's our responsibility as employers there? And I think development of, and helping people develop into other roles where they can be more creative and bring more value. But I think there's probably, even outside of the AI changes, employees want to do something better. So how does an employer approach that, figure out what that development path is? Maybe they're in a job that, this person's going to be an accounting clerk. And if they stay in this path, they're going to be an accounting clerk for the rest of their career. This is what the accounting clerks look like, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, we may give them some new skills to keep up with new technology, but it's an accounting clerk's an accounting clerk, or an HR rep's pretty much an HR rep if they don't want to go up to a generalist or they don't have that, that skill set or background. So what does an employer do to really help people develop? How do you identify what those opportunities look like and still have an ROI for the employer?
Yeah, I will say this, especially with the AI, there is a lot of uncertainty for some, confusion, and then you have those that are fearful because it's new. I want to encourage everybody, AI is really not new. It's new to the workplace. It's new how we're using it. But as long as we've had smartphones, AI has been a part of that, right? There's so many, as soon as internet comes out, there's a lot of things that kind of derive, when you talk about algorithms and explaining that, it's all backed by a lot of AI, right? What you see on your social media, it's been there. Now it changes how we use it. And this is why I encourage people. And my partner, Ben Eubanks, who's passionate about AI and speaks on the rights on it all the time. One of the things that we understand together is that AI is here. And I would encourage people this: AI is not going to replace people fully. But what's going to replace people who are not using AI is people who have accepted AI, right? So AI may not replace you, but somebody who is willing to use AI to essentially save 40 hours a year of a job by using AI, right? I always encourage people, there's a way to save up to 40 hours a year. How would you do that? And it's very simple, right? Whether it's different projects that you're using day to day. So AI is not going to replace you, but somebody who uses AI will definitely replace you. So that's the scary part.
And when it comes to... And there's just to say, I've got on the imperativeinfo.com website, I've got a recording of my webinar that I did in July on using AI, in HR and the ethical and practical considerations. And on September 11th, I'm doing a a podcast or a webinar on how to use large language models, generative AI, in becoming more productive. So just go check out imperativeinfo.com/webinars for that. But I think, and it sounds like I need to have your partner on, and we'll talk AI too, because that's everybody wants to talk about it. So okay, so there's that. So we definitely need to, I think, embrace AI and recognize it's here. So go on and keep talking about what you were saying about helping people develop.
Yeah, I think, some of the other things that you'll see when it comes to development, you can get into this balance of upskilling, reskilling, right, and cross-skilling in a sense. A lot of companies that I've seen thrive, especially in the tech space. I used to be in the wireless tech industry for several years, 18 retail stores across 2 states. And one of the things that we always desire to see is that you never knew whether or not Sarah or Joe in the front was going to be down, or Paul or Laura in the back, who are our technicians, if somebody was missing. So it was always important for us to cross skill. Everybody's responsibility in the retail was that everybody's a salesperson. You're selling something, whether you're fixing the device, you're selling quality, device, that they're going to be fixed. If you're selling up front, obviously you're selling protection and solutions to help, lower the risk of this happening again, right? And so sales was everybody's responsibility. So the importance of cross-skilling is so important. You mentioned, certain positions that, hey, this is what you're going to do, and this is, how it is. Not a lot is going to change. But how do we continue to get better knowledge? What are we doing to improve our product, our systems within how we're doing things? Using AI could be one, right? Managing how to become more efficient with our time. And so although the job in some cases in descriptions, especially in manufacturing, there may not be a lot of changes unless you're getting a new machine, right? There may be some updates there from a technology standpoint. But how do we get better? I look at some of those soft skills, right? How do we get better with each other? How do we work together a little bit better? For those who are in assembly lines, it's a little bit simplicity. You're doing the same thing over and over, right? But what are some areas that we can be better as people? That's where I get into the development aspect, where I believe a better you, a better me in all aspects of life, right, becomes healthier for the overall business. And when I think of the ROI, a lot of things for most entrepreneurs, one of the things that changed for me is when I always heard ROI, I heard money, right? And it changed for me 2 years into entrepreneurship as a business, and it was supposed to be a mom and pop shop, 1 store that turned into 18. What really changed for me is that I understood ROI was not monetary. ROI was about what I could not get back as a business leader, as an employee, ever again. The greatest return of investment is time, how efficient we can be. And so once I grasped that, and I understood that our greatest gift was not necessarily money, because we lose it, we spend it, we can gain it back. But what we cannot get back is time. And so how do we make each other better to where we're the most efficient, right? Because everybody can say that their company that does the same thing has best customer service, great facilities. We want it to be empowered by the greatest ROI that nobody can ever give back to us once it's spent, and that is time. We're going to give you quality time. And I think that's important.
And so when people feel like they're spending their time in a meaningful way, they're going to do a better job. And that's going to lead to that engagement you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Nobody wants to go do drudgery all day long. And that's the, and like even in our organization, 3/4 or more of my employees are background investigation analysts, and they're looking at public records all day. They're writing reports. One section's interviewing previous employers. One section's doing really deep dive interviews with maybe applicants and associates. They're doing all these different things. And everybody kind of ends up in a place that they really perform best in. But we pay them a premium once they've cross-trained and they have the competencies in all those areas. So like you say, if somebody's out, we're not hamstrung in getting our reports to our clients, because we have other people who may not love doing this, but we know they're competent and they're they've got a great team, so they're willing to jump in and help and do that. So those competencies are good, but people need to feel like they're spending their time in I remember when I was in corporate America, there was a lot of times where I had projects that were given to me by a VP of HR or an ops leader that were just stupid. And I'm pouring hours and hours into this, and I know there's no value on the out. And I think that burns your credibility as a leader. And it's certainly the thing that always kept me looking for that next role when I was on the corporate side.
Yeah. And I think, and I'll add this and I'll share as well, because when it comes to that powerful intersection of performance development, right? Engagement really leads to, what we, recognize as recognition as well, being recognized for the work that you do, especially when, maybe there's not a higher job title that you can seek. Being recognized for the work that you do is important. When we looked at our peace study, one of the things that we saw, especially from a management standpoint, and even, best management, practices from a performance side of things, some of the primary goals that people wanted to see was improvement on that performance and that development on the career, right, and the succession plan. The other ones was like, how do we measure performance? When the job responsibility and duty is kind of consistent in what it is. How do we set those and define goals within those things and really retain those high performers? And so those are some of the strategies. And I bring that up because one of the things that's important for us, and I encourage everybody out there, if you're not using some type of performance management system to kind of gauge, the ROI for your industry, then it will lack. One of the things that we saw was that companies who were ineffective, they said, we're kind of ineffective when it comes to our performance process and measuring those ROIs. 40% of them said that they don't train or support for something simple as performance reviews. So if you think of something as simple, a leader being in there, talking to their employees, trying to create that engagement and, recognize them for things, but they're not trained to do so, that's somewhat of a shock, and for me, it would be embarrassment to have that as a company. For those companies who are very effective, 94% of them say, we train, we get support for something as simple as doing performance reviews. And so that goes back to that development training emphasis on how important it is to be an effective company.
And listeners, if you've got your shot glass ready, that's another Good Morning HR shot, drinking game thing. We always, are talking with so many of our guests when we're talking about leadership is that we have somebody who's a really good operator. They're really good at the technical role. They're really good at doing the job. Maybe they're a team player. So, hey, people like you and you're good at the job. We're going to make you a manager. And they throw them in there and they don't do that training. And I saw it throughout my corporate career, and I've seen it the last 25 years in consulting with clients that's, I think, the biggest Achilles heel of so many organizations is that they're not really training their managers. And, it takes time. And, well, quite honestly, we don't have anybody in-house to do it. And, we don't want to spend the money, or we need to get them right in that position right away and just throw them into the fire. Or I hear, well, that's how I learned. Either you have it or you don't. And so I think those are the kind of mistakes employers make, because just because somebody is a nice guy, that could be the worst characteristic for a manager, that they're just, they happen to be a nice guy, and they have a hard time holding somebody accountable. And on the flip side, if they just want to be good in this role, but they don't know how, you've got to give them those skills.
Yeah. Yeah. The worst, and I'm a witness to, I did this a few times, right? The worst thing to do is to, elevate and promote somebody because they're nice or they've been there for X amount of years and they've been loyal to us. One of my worst mistakes was taking one of our best technicians and making them a manager. Mm-hmm. And then having to have a tough conversation because I moved them out of the right seat, right? And so it's important to measure those things. And I always say, inspect what you expect. If you're expecting something, what are you doing to inspect and make sure that it's done right and that they're leading right? And I'd rather promote you and pay you your worth and value versus giving you a title just for the sake of a title. And I understand titles mean a lot, especially for the future work for some. But man, I would rather pay you a lot and give you the benefits that you deserve, whatever that looks like for you, than to move you out of the position that you're going to thrive in and then feel miserable later for doing so.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative. Bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Research Credits. Then select episode 163 and enter the keyword meaning. That's MEANING. And if you're looking for even more recertification credit, last week I hosted a 1-hour webinar called Background Check Mythbusters. We discussed the legal use of arrest records, when an employer can inquire into a candidate's criminal history, what limitations may apply to an employer's consideration of criminal history, and much more. The recording of this webinar is pre-approved for 1 hour of recertification credit from both HRCI and SHRM, and you can watch it at imperativeinfo.com/webinars. And now back to my conversation with George Rogers. And you mentioned performance management systems. And I think a big part that's missing from so many of those is some sort of measurement. I'm a big believer that I haven't found a position yet that you can't tie a number to, that you can't use, you can't measure what somebody's delivering to the organization. And so you can see when it rises and you can see when it falls, and you can make adjustments as you need to. Do you have any preferences or ideas around measuring employee performance?
Yeah, I'll say this, and I can share an infographic with you, or you can visit lhra.io, and under our research tab, infographics.
And we'll include a link in the show notes to that. Yeah.
Yep. And so on this P study that I referenced earlier, companies with ineffective practices, number one priority was measuring performance, right? The highly effective companies, number one priority was improving performance. And so one that was ineffective, measuring the performance, and the other one improving. The top 7 performance practices in use today, and I'll give them to you in order real fast. Number one practice is recognition for good performance. Number 2 is focusing on development and leveraging the strengths. So as we talked about just a second ago, if somebody is very strong in a position, don't move them out of that position. If they want to be promoted and desire more, what are they looking for? Are they looking for a title? Or are they looking for an increase in pay? Have that conversation versus removing them from their strengths. Leverage their strengths to get them to where they desire. That goes to that relationship where I feel comfortable having those discussions with my direct manager on what I desire and what I'm seeking out of those things. Number 3, which I'm very passionate about, and we're seeing a lot of this. We typically see it in the C-suite, but now we're seeing it in some of the emerging leaders and development leaders, mid-level managers, where coaching for development is a high priority. So number 4 is coaching for development. And I think I skipped number 3, which is an annual goal setting. So number 1, I'll repeat it and go back. Number 1, recognition for good performance. Number 2, focusing on developing and leveraging the strengths. Number 3 is annual goal setting. Number 4 is coaching for development on that. Number 5 is peer-to-peer feedback. That is a top priority. Number 6 is more frequent goal setting. So this is having 2 or more sessions annually, not just something that we're going to do once a year. This is something that I like to refer to, and me and my friend Ryan, he uses, we call it RSVP. RSVP stands for roles, strengths, values, and purpose. And so having quarterly check-ins with your employees, where you go over, not for you as a manager, but for your employees to say, hey, this is what's different about my role that I need to update you on. If you're like me, George likes to help over there in this department to help out, Sarah, or use my creative strengths to somebody else's department. And so my roles change a little bit, and I need to let you know that. Reminder of the strengths. This is where I feel strong at. Am my strengths being used within the workplace, right? Because if not, people want to be able to connect their strengths, and being able to do so. A lot of people are fearful to say they're all their strengths because they're afraid the company's going to use their strengths, but not the company is not using their pocketbook. And so how do we balance that? And then values. Do my values still align with the company's values? Do I feel like the company's values are being lived on a day? Or are they just a moment on the wall or on our little passes as we go through our building and whatnot? And then purpose. my desired purpose of why I work here. Again, attaching that why we do what we do to the what. The final one, number 7, is in the moment manager feedback. And I mentioned the RSVP because if we're not doing quarterly check-ins, if we're not checking with our employees, I am a believer, Mike, that if you don't check in with your employees will eventually check out, right? And that goes back to our conversation to begin with. How do you feel? Because how I feel is what I'm going to believe. If my leader is not checking in with me, if my leader is not, recognizing me and giving me the recognition that I feel like is needed, not just for me, but just for all in general. If I feel like our leader is not in touch or connecting with us, and they're not checking in, more than just a system and process and management style, I'm eventually going to check out, and we'll see those people that, we labeled, and I hate the word, quiet quitting. It's kind of been the trend for a while, like ghosting, but the check the box people, where they just check the box and go forward. And so I encourage people, check in with your employees, because if you don't, they eventually will check out.
And I think a lot of organizations maybe were doing that when we were fully present in the office, and we went remote or in hybrid. That FaceTime, that casual conversations, those incidental conversations with employees and leaders is diminished a lot. And I think we're seeing that, especially with the millennial generation and Gen Z. They want more feedback. And I found in our own experience that the younger our employees are, the more feedback they want. And so, we're giving our employees that daily, they get their feedback on what their quality was and productivity was. The day before, our leaders meet with their employees on an ongoing basis. I meet with all my direct reports once a week. We've got an hour blocked off that's sacrosanct, and they bring their issues, I bring mine, and we talk about whatever's going on. And then we also spend, because we're fully remote, with each of my leads, I bring them into to a half-day meeting one-on-one at least once a month, just to really give them all my focus so that they know how important that is. And I think a lot of companies are suffering because their employees want to be remote, but they don't want to make, that doesn't mean you can sacrifice that ongoing feedback. And I think the other thing you said was really interesting was that connection between the feedback from their peers. We had Andrew Pryor, who's the CHRO of a large software company here in North Texas, on probably 100 episodes ago now, but that conversation, because they've got systems where employees can recognize one another through their intranet or their online network for performance and for going above and beyond, those kinds of things, and there's rewards attached to that. And that conversation changed how we do ours. And so now we've set up a peer system where every employee gets a balance of PTO each month that they can award to one another. And they have to tie those awards to our values. So where this person demonstrated lived out our values in an extraordinary way. And I don't think we have anybody who has, at the end of the month, balances on their PTO to give away. And so and everybody gets recognition. So and so's recognized so and so for this, and then their actual narrative about how this person lived our values. So we're constantly reinforcing our values and what they mean and why we live them this way. But also those individuals are getting that recognition. So we're really up against the clock here, but any last thoughts on really improving employee engagement? I'm going to include links to your material, the podcast. By the way, the podcast is, again, Champion Your Culture podcast, and the book is Champion Your Purpose. But last thoughts, George?
Yeah, I'll just encourage people, especially leaders, and I'll speak directly to leaders. And I'm passionate about. My purpose is championing leaders, right? And so I encourage you, especially more than ever. One of the things that I'm hearing at a lot of these conferences that I'm attending is from employees is they don't hear us. They don't hear us. And when I ask what they mean, they say this. They say, we'll bring something to a leader, and the leader wants to fix it or fix me. And it's so important to understand that when people are talking, Mike, when we're having a conversation or I'm coming to you and I'm confiding in you about frustrations or irritations, and I remind you, frustrations is a sign of investment. Frustrations is not a bad thing. I used to get so irritated when employees were not frustrated about work because I didn't feel like they were invested. When the stock market crashed in 2008, at that time, I had no frustrations. I wasn't worried because I wasn't invested. Now, if the stock crashed today, I'm going to be a little frustrated because I have some investments in it. Frustrations is a sign of investments, but it's behind the frustration. What is bothering them? What's the issue? And when somebody speaks to us as leaders, they're not speaking to us for us to fix them. They're speaking to us to hear them. And sometimes that hearing is just simply that. It's not for you to go behind and say, all right, this is what you need to do. No, just hear their voice and understand it for what it is for that moment and let it be just that. Letting them talk, hear them. Don't try to fix them.
It's just like a marriage. Right?
It is. It's
my
that
wife
conversation.
brings up something, and I say, and you know, she married. It's part of the shame is on her. She married an entrepreneur, and my gut instinct is, okay, you bring me a problem, I fix it. That's what I do for a living. That's what makes me happy. But sometimes you're right. Just got to listen, acknowledge, and I've got long-term employees who've gone through personal crises in their lives and things, and often I can say, I can think in the back of my head, well, here's how you fix that. You get rid of that bum, or you do this, or and I just, oh, wow, that's really tough. What do you need from me to help you get through this? And I just have to shut up and go from there. Well, that's all the time we have. Thanks for joining me, George. I really appreciate it. I hope to have you back. My pleasure.
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for listening. You can comment on this episode or search our previous episodes at goodmorninghr.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcast. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and you can reach him at robmakespods.com. And thank you to Imperative's marketing coordinator, Marianne Hernandez, who keeps the trains running on time, which basically means keeping me running on time. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.